Hi, I'm Tia,
And I'm Toni.
and this is Emotions Unscripted. So, I have been on a probably 8 week. I don't remember how long our gap was between us meeting. Kind of like spiral, and I don't like to call it spiral because it makes it sound like I was like having a mental episode or something. But we had talked about some of the topics that we would talk about, here, and I kind of got like lost in like the first one that you mentioned, and it's because I was like reading through this book, and it was talking about like the power of your subconscious mind, and like some of the conditionings and things like that, and then it kind of just sparked something in me, and I was like, wait a minute, what about this and what about that? And so I started thinking about like therapy and like therapists like as a whole, and how so much of what we learn as therapists, and so much of how we show up, and so much of how the clients experience us, has to do with like this system of like conditioning that we've kind of gone through. And so what I think about is how one of the things that I often say whenever I get in like a new graduate student intern underneath me is, forget everything that you've learned in school. And they're like, what? And I was like, forget everything that you have learned in school. You don't need any of that stuff. You either have it or you don't. And I always tell them, and I will know if you have it. And I'm usually pretty good at being able to tell who has it and who doesn't. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, all that schooling, all those papers that you wrote, all those books that you read was part of a system of conditioning to produce a certain type of therapist to be able to keep us in these systems of conditioning. And a lot of times people look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm not crazy. But what I look at is so much of what we learn is how to do therapy in a particular way. And it's like, you have to do it, you have to pick a theory. And so I'm sure you remember in school they were like, pick a theory. You have to, become an expert in that one theory, pick a theory. And so people will pick a theory, and they go and they try to force every client that they see into this theory, into this box. And they wonder why people aren't sticking around, or why something isn't working. And I always say, because you can't put people in boxes. You can't force everybody into the same box, because we're all unique individuals with individual like lived experiences. And it becomes like this like shocker to people, that like, oh, what they told us in school doesn't work. Mm-mm. It works on a small group of people that you'll probably never even interact with. And so being able to push aside that stuff and kind of tune in into the natural abilities that you have as a healer is like one of the most important things. But what I look at is why we're taught that, to kind of follow this train of thought, is because if people are deconditioned, then we don't follow the rules anymore. It's like we don't go and go to school and get a job and get married and have children. We don't follow that system anymore. When we break down the conditioning, we start to live our own lives, and we can't have little worker bees in the US if people aren't following the system. And so that's where my whole train of thought went when we were talking about therapy and the stigmas and things like that. Is we as therapists, I won't say me, and I'll tell you why I won't say me, but a lot of therapists are in this place where they are very conditioned, and they go into this environment where they're supposed to be creating a space for like deconditioning, and they don't, because they're conditioned. And so all they do is train people to cope with or manage the symptoms of the systems that are failing them. And so that's where my mind went, and I can go on for hours on this topic because it really resonates with me in terms of our role as therapists. If we haven't done our own work and deconditioned ourselves, all we're doing is like adding to the problem.
For sure. When you said deconditioning, it made me think about this TikTok trend where it's like, as a therapist, I do this in session. As a therapist, I don't do this in session. Like things like, showing up in comfortable clothes, or, letting the clients eat snacks, or even cursing in session. And that brings up like a very heated debate. Like, you're a professional, you shouldn't curse. But depending on your ethnicity, depending on your population, you know, a therapist that curses may make the client feel more seen, or make them feel like more connected. So I just thought that that was interesting. That's what I was thinking about the whole time we were talking about deconditioning.
Hmm. And I think that you said that word unprofessional, and it's something that I talk about all the time because I've always been kind of labeled as unprofessional. You don't do that. You don't show up that way. And you know me, I'll show up in hoodies and some, I don't do sweatpants because I don't like the sweatpants that I wear in the house, but hoodies and leggings or hoodies and jeans, and that's how I'll show up. And I recently had a conversation with one of my interns about that, and they were talking about how they like to show up. And they were saying, well, I like to make sure that I am presenting myself in a way that shows my value. And I was like, so my hoodie doesn't show my value? And so, but what happens is that we're conditioned to believe that you're only valuable if you are dressed nicely. And I was like, what I put on does not change what comes out of my mouth. And so we were talking about maybe there needs to be some reflection for them. It's like, are you doing it because it makes you feel better? Or are you doing it because it creates this image that you are professional?
For sure. It makes me think about like when I was a baby therapist and I was going through my program. And I know as therapists, everybody's program is different. But I feel like when you actually did the assignments, you actually did the work, like truly intentionally doing the work. I feel like with the program I went to, there was a lot of deconditioning as far as like me knowing myself, like knowing my triggers, or knowing the things that I need to work on. Like, I guess not deconditioning, but more like increasing my self awareness. It led me to seek therapy, and like, so I felt like the program I went to increased my self awareness. But you're so right with that. Like, the things that we're not aware of, or our beliefs, or the conditioning can just lead to automatic responses. That automatic response may not be the right fit for the client in that moment.
Yeah. It makes me think about when clients come in and they're talking about marriage and children. They're like, oh, I haven't gotten married yet. I haven't had kids. I'm running out of time. And I'll always ask them, I was like, do you want to get married? Do you want to have kids? And they're like, huh? And I was like, do you want those things? And they'll like stop and think because nobody has ever asked them if they wanted those things. It was just part of what you were supposed to do. It's like you go to school, you get married, you have children. That's what you do. And so a lot of my clients, and I always try to make sure, I'm like, am I making a generation of people who don't want to have kids? But when I pose the question to them, so many of them realize I don't want kids. A lot of them still want marriage because they want companionship, and that's human nature and things like that. I understand that. But a lot of them are like, I think you're onto something. I don't think I want kids.
No, seriously, because it's almost like a formula, like a cut and place, cut and paste. Like, you go to school, you do this. Like, it's almost like a lot of us, like, our future is already mapped out. Um, and we had no autonomy in the situation. Like, we didn't actively choose certain things. So when you get in therapy, especially younger, like in your 20s and stuff, I feel like it's an eye opener, because maybe your caregivers didn't present that to you, didn't present options to you. It's almost like you asking that question is like giving the person the opportunity to reflect on it, and like give themselves permission to want what they want, or focus on what they don't want.
And I think that's part of the fact that I I'm further along in my deconditioned journey. I'm not going to say I'm completely unconditioned, deconditioned. Um, but because of that, I think about the conditioned therapists or the very like textbook therapists, and it's like, would they have even asked that question, or would they help the client navigate? Oh, not having children yet, or not having this yet. I'm going to ask the question because I want to make sure that you have looked at all your choices before we start looking at what direction we're going to go.
Mhm. Yeah. It's really about gathering all that information because essentially like your client is the expert, but sometimes experts miss things and maybe they're not self-aware of certain things. So, you're unlocking like this whole other level for them so they're able to decondition themselves like you said.
Yeah. When you said the client is the expert, it kind of reminded me back to when I said, I'm not one of those therapists. And the reason why I was saying that is like kind of going back to the program, and the program that I went to, one of our big focuses was like collaborative therapy, and collaborative therapy takes that standpoint of the client is the expert on their own lives. You meet them in the here and now, the power of language and conversation in terms of healing versus all these tools and techniques and things like that. It's like you use whatever you need to be able to kind of help this client. And so I always am very thankful for the foundation that I had with being able to start off in a place where it was like, forget all that crap. The client's the expert. You're not the one who knows everything because you went to school. And I think about how much the focus was on like not creating a hierarchy with our clients. And so a lot of the reason why I dress the way that I dress is because I always want my clients to feel comfortable. And if I'm in a suit, and heels, and I come in there, now I've created this hierarchy because a lot of times my clients are, in sweats or in jeans or, except for my attorneys, they always come in like sharp. um, and so it kind of creates a place of, well, I'm this prestigious person who's all buttoned up and have these nice clothes. And so I'm better than you. And so my program really focused on don't create that. Even like the way that I set up my office, like there is no therapist chair. And so there is no, I sit in this chair because it's the best chair. And it becomes very much of you sit wherever you want. And so I had a good foundation for the deconditioning and how I kind of show up as a therapist that, other people that I've seen come in through my internship programs or as associates have not had. And so I'd work really hard, be like, no, forget all of that.
Yeah. There should definitely be more in school about the deconditioning, but I mean, we all know it's based off of like programming. Um, but that should definitely be a thing where new therapists can kind of come in and develop themselves. And kind of like you said, like you're essentially setting the vibe. Like if your client is seeing you for the first time and you have on like a hoodie, it's like they may feel like you're relatable. They may feel like, you know, that you're safe to talk to versus like you being in like a lab coat and creating,
Mhm.
that distance between you two.
Yeah. And the thing is like if they see me as unprofessional because I have on this hoodie, they're probably not ready for therapy with me because they have so many levels of conditioning and what professionalism looks like. And it's going to be really hard to get them to shift that mindset. And I'm good, but I'm not, I don't have all the skills or all the tools to kind of shift the mindsets of people who are so ingrained and so comfortable with the level of conditioning that they've experienced.
For sure, because everybody does have different levels. I guess that's a as therapists, like we're meeting our client where they're at, because everybody's like at a different stage and a different level. Yeah, we're all at a different stage and a different level, and I think that's the beautiful thing about having so many therapists for clients because we're not always going to be somebody's cup of tea, even if we're like very knowledgeable and we have the tools. Um, So I think that's really important with the deconditioning is finding the right fit for a therapist so y'all are able to like build that rapport and get to know each other.
Mhm. Because like imagine if you're this client and you're on this journey, and it's like you've had like all these eye-opening experiences and you want to make these changes that kind of go against the norm, and then you sit in front of a therapist who is very conditioned and are like, no, you have to keep talking to your family, that's family. Or I hear that one all the time and it makes my skin crawl. But imagine going through that and that therapist is still in that conditioned mindset, and it becomes this whole, now I'm being forced to kind of stay in this relationship with these people that are causing me harm because my therapist doesn't understand or isn't aware that you don't have to always maintain contact with your family.
For sure, because that therapist could have a specific belief about family dynamics and holding the family together. Let's not even bring in religion. So it's so important for therapists to be aware of their beliefs, because I feel like the beliefs is where the conditioning is like deeply ingrained.
Yeah. It's funny because you say, let's not even bring in religion. And I was like, well, let's bring it in. But I think that that's one of those major conditioning systems. And so when we look at like, oh, society conditions you some way, but religion also conditions you some way. And I think it's sometimes very hard for therapists to be able to break away from their religious conditioning too. One of the things that I kind of struggle with is when I think about the LGBTQ population. I think about the therapists that I have, and a lot of them will say I work with that population, and I'm like, do you really? And so in conversation with them, it may sound like they're accepting and that they can work with that population, but then they'll say something and I'll hear this underlying bias. And it's like, oh no, that's part of your conditioning. I'm not sending any clients towards you. And it's hard to kind of help them see what just happened. But I'm like, no, that belief set that you've held your whole life, even though you're trying to do something different, you're not quite there yet. And I don't want you touching this population of people and causing them more harm.
For sure. I've had clients come in consultation and they'll like tiptoe around and they're like, are you sure you don't have any negative biases towards certain populations? Because I've seen therapists in the past and I see their faces and I see them kind of like, kind of make a face when certain subjects are brought up. And that's 100% valid, because as a therapist, like we can cause harm if
Mhm,
we have certain biases, or if we think that the client should live their life based on our expectations.
mhm. Yeah. And I am such, people know me, I'm such a free thinker, and it's like, do whatever you want to do, live your best life type of thing. But not all therapists are like that. It's like, no, you fit into this little box over here. And I'm like, no, there is no box. There's nothing that can contain me. Kind of like ideals.
Mhm. Because the thing is, people are easily able to tell when people are genuine or when people are disingenuous. So a therapist can say that they're comfortable with certain populations, but what they are showing and the energy that they're giving is not showing up as that.
Mhm. It makes me think about a conversation I was having with a client, and we were talking about knowing your therapist's um, beliefs and having kind of an idea of what their beliefs are. And I've seen like in other therapist groups, they'll talk about, well, no, my clients don't know any of this stuff about me, or if they knew this about me, they probably wouldn't like me. And I was like, I think that's a problem because you can't tell me that you're really 100% able to control some of that subconscious programming that you have when you're in therapy with them. And so when I think about my clients knowing me and how I stand and how I believe and those types of things, I'm so open with those things. I'm very upfront so they know like how I see, the different systems and things like that. And so yes, do I still need to break away from some things? Yes. But I think that in the grand scheme of things, I have been able to do the work to be able to step away from the systems that we're supposed to be in and the ones that we're supposed to operate in while still being ethical, because we still have ethical codes that we have to follow, but giving clients a therapeutic experience that they may have not had before. And that's one of the things I tell clients is, therapy with me is probably going to look a lot different than what you may have had before or what you may see in the future. And that's because I'm going to sit with you in a way that other therapists don't. I'm going to share with you in a way that other therapists don't. But it's all part of me being a real person. I think about like being a blank slate. And so we talk about that in school and different theories. It's like be a blank slate. You don't. Sometimes I've even heard people say, "Don't laugh with your clients," and I'm like, no, I'm not a blank slate. I'm full of personality. I'm a real person, and you're going to see in working with me that I'm a real person. but so much of our education, training, things like that say to take the person out of the therapist. And I think that that's like the worst advice that we have. But what it does is it interferes with the therapeutic relationship. So when a person is talking to a therapist who's not a real person, it interferes with the therapeutic relationship, which then interferes with the effectiveness of therapy. So the person leaves therapy not getting any true healing and continuing to, be a victim to the systems that have been created for them.
For sure, and I also feel like with the deconditioning or with the conditioning, it can cause the clients to feel judged, and the therapist may not even be aware of that.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, and I see it, and it's like, oh, this client didn't come back. And I was like, because you judged them. That's why.
Mhm.
It makes me think about this post I was reading, and they were they were they were overstepping like their their place as a therapist. And the gist of it is like they were working with a client, and they found out that the way that they were getting the therapy session, the benefits weren't necessarily in the traditional way of how this program works. And they were like, well, I don't want to work with somebody who is being dishonest. And I was like, what does that have to do with you? This person has come to therapy. Who cares how they have gotten here? As long as they're not stealing somebody's information and using somebody's, insurance in fraudulent ways, like, why are you concerning yourself with, what this person's connection to this other person that they're getting their benefits from is? And I was like, how did y'all even get on that line of questioning anyways? I was like, you were being nosy and overstepping your place as a therapist. And so when I think about who we are, who we are as therapists and what our roles are, I think so many people also cross lines, and they kind of create these environments where they are, judging their clients, which so many clients fear when it comes to coming to therapy is they fear, that judgment. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to, think that I'm a bad mom, or they're going to think I'm a bad person and things like that. And so much of the things that therapists do kind of confirm that. And that's why people leave therapy. But I wanted to kind of end this one with this a healer's manifesto. And so me and my best friend, ChatGPT, came up with this. I am not a technician. I am not a servant of broken systems. I am not a vessel for recycled theories that erase the soul. I am a healer. My power is not found in textbooks. It lives in my body, my memories, my intuition, my bloodline. It hums in the songs that rise up during sessions, in the stories that whisper through silences, in the truths that emerge before words are even spoken. I reject the conditioning that tells me to be neutral when injustice demands outrage. I reject the scripts that tell me to be clinical when humanity demands connection. I reject the idea that healing is sterile, procedural, detached. I remember healing is relational, healing is conversational, healing is revolutionary. I honor the wisdom that lives beyond evidence based checklists, the ancestral knowing, the spirit led guidance, the felt sense that cannot be taught but must be remembered. I know that real healing is not about symptom reduction. It is about reclaiming your soul. It's about deconditioning. It is about freeing people from the lies they were taught about themselves. I know that every conversation is a co creation. Every room is a sacred space. Every client is an individual, not a problem to be fixed. I will not flatten myself to fit inside systems that were never built for me. I will not trade my intuition for acceptance. I will not betray my calling to feel safe. I am here to remember. I am here to resist. I am here to heal wildly, imperfectly, humanly. And when the systems tell me to sit down, stay quiet, stay clinical, I will stand up, speak truth, and stay human. Because the world doesn't need more therapists, it needs more healers, and I am one of them.